It is time to go live. That was one of many failed jingles for the live show. I have a conundrum at the start of these live shows because I'm going to do the live pouring of the tea. That's not the conundrum. But before I go into the conundrum that I know you're probably dying to hear about, check out this sweet mug. This is a good mug right here. Here are the reasons this is a good mug. First of all, pleasing shape. Good sort of rising out. You can imagine what the potter did with this. Hope, BC, that's a good place. I like Hope, and I like that that's the name of the city. And then that's just big, satisfying, and a good color palette. Overall, good mug. Recommend pouring tea into it. Let's see how it goes. Here comes the live pouring the tea. That's right over an expensive keyboard. That's what you come here for, is the daring feats of tea pouring. Now, this mug takes a little longer to pour tea into because it's quite large, so we're just going to let that happen. I'm going to bring up Fatchabook and make sure that we are indeed live. Yeah, there, okay, that's good. And I go here, and then I just mute it. Oh, nice, it's pre-muted. That's the good stuff. And that way I can see the comments and respond to them in real time, which is what people are here for. The challenge I face with the start of the live show is that I want to leave room for me to be fully expressed in my playfulness. I want to bring some playfulness, but because we take these live shows and put them on the podcast, I also don't want to be so silly and playful that I completely turn off any new listeners to the podcast. Lest this be the first episode they hear. If I start talking about not wearing pants or something like that, they're going to be like, this isn't transformational leadership. This is some dorkwad talking about not wearing pants. And whilst I may wish to not wear pants at the office, this is not the leadership tips and tricks that I believe I need. So this is the conundrum. So I'm always trying to strike a balance. Who one? Oh, we had one viewer and I was going to ask who you are, but now we have zero. So this is easier. The 0 viewers. A client of mine gave me a beautiful acknowledgement the other day. Well, prior to me describing that, I wrote a post recently about just the stories I was clearing. And the act of clearing, the ontological act of clearing, I'm going to describe to you now. This is your leadership tip and trick, people that are new to the podcast. You're getting it right now. So the ontological act of clearing is the act of first getting clear on the crappy stories we woke up with. And your crappy stories are not special, significant, wonderful, magical. There's nothing unique or powerful or amazing about your particular crappy stories. They're just your particular crappy stories. And all of us have particular crappy stories. So my crappy stories would be often what I notice on some level, the stories that are operating are some flavor of I'm not enough, I'm a loser, I'm awkward, hard for people to connect with. I'm irrelevant. I have no impact. I don't make a difference. People aren't interested in me. And I'm boring. And then there's often some flavor of I'm trapped. I can't create something. I'm falling behind. I'm stuck. So all of us have these stories always, constantly, because as humans, we're meaning makers of everything. And we make positive and negative meaning out of everything. The difference is that we make the negative stories significant. The fact that I feel this way about myself is significant. And the same thing is true about our positive stories, but never mind that for now. So what a lot of us do from that significance, the fact that we've got these negative stories, the significance is that's wrong. We shouldn't have those. Those are bad. We shouldn't give any voice to them. And so what we try to do is suppress them. We do things like try to come up with a positive counter to those negative stories. Or we try to convince ourselves that's not true. We try to convince ourselves the stories aren't true. Or we sort of do the energetic equivalent of plugging our ears and going la 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 la. If I say that loud enough, I can't hear the negative story. So we do all manner of these sort of things. And that is problematic because what that does is it lends credence to the negative story. If it's simply a story that you have, and there's no significance, it's just like a passing thought, a shitty story that just happened to be there, then there's nothing you have to do about it. You don't have to pretend it's not there. You don't have to force it down. You can just let it be like, oh, that's just the crappy story I woke up with. So the first step in this clearing process is for us to just get honest about the story rather than making it significant and trying to do anything about it. So that I'm not going to go into all of the steps in that, but if you as a leader began starting your day by asking yourself, what are the crappy stories that are going through my head, and just distinguishing them, what is the content of them, e.g., I'm not enough, I'm irrelevant. So if you started there, started doing that, and started distinguishing them as just a crappy story. So rather than getting embroiled in the content of them, oh my God, I'm irrelevant. What do I need to do to fix that? I should go and make a big difference, or I should push that story. No, none of that. Just going, oh, I have a crappy story, and that's exactly what it is, a crappy story. If you start doing that as a leader, you're going to start to make a difference in your life. Because now what's happening is instead of having a crappy story and then becoming your crappy story, either by believing it's true or by working really hard to prove that it isn't true, instead of doing that, you just become someone who's all right with the fact that, yeah, sometimes I woke up with some shitty stories. That doesn't have to change anything about my life. I don't have to change the way I'm showing up. I can continue to act in alignment with my commitments. Boom. So that's the practice if you wanted to take a practice out of this. The acknowledgement from the client came because I shared in a post the crappy stories that I'd cleared that day. I just shared, these are the stories that I've cleared. This is a practice I take on every week as a leader, or every day rather. Here's what they are. This isn't a cry for help. I'm not making these significant. I'm just sharing them to be intimate, authentic, and to connect. And I'm sharing that stuff because I really believe there is a lack of modeling that in our world and amongst our leaders. In fact, if you share your crappy stories, even if you're not making significance about them, other people will. I got people that were like, oh, you're inviting people to make themselves wrong. You're inviting people to believe the worst truths about themselves. In fact, I'm doing the opposite. I'm inviting them to notice this is just a story that's there and to not make it significant. As long as we're like, I can't even listen to that, I got to push it down, that's how it gains power over us. So I shared this, and then I went on with my day. And I also added, like, if anyone wants to provide acknowledgement, I'm always a yes to that. This post is not a secret attempt to get that, but if you feel called to give that to me, I'll take that. And my client was acknowledging me, and he was saying, one of the ways you had a real impact on me, Adam, was you were doing your live and you were sharing how you had 0 viewers, which I currently have. And you were generating. Even though you had no one watching, you were just showing up, doing your work, generating, being in the conversation, creating a conversation, even though there was no one else there. And he was sharing how he was listening to that after the fact, and he'd shared this with someone else, and just like what an impact it made on him. And so, thank you, client, for that gift, for that acknowledgement. I think it's okay to share your name, Leo. Thank you, Leo, for that beautiful acknowledgement. And thank you for giving me that gift, because right now, there's 0 people watching. I can just keep generating and remind myself, thanks to the power of that acknowledgement, it's okay. This is the work as much as when there's 58 viewers or 100 viewers. I mean, that'll be amazing. And when I have 100 viewers, then I'll be satisfied, and then those crappy stories will go away forever, surely, right? No. Okay, well, you guys are missing out. All of you not watching right now, because this is going to be one hell of a live. I'm stoked for these topics. We've got juicy ass topics. It's going to be cool. We're going to slide right now into some rock talk. That's right. We're going to talk about rocks. This is the only live show that has the balls, the energetic, ontological balls to talk about minerals, which is another slang term for balls in England, I think. I'm going to just talk briefly. I'm wearing this cool necklace with an eagle head on it. A friend of mine, Padashakti, makes these and imbues them with a lot of spiritual energy, which you can call bullshit if you like, or you can just think is cool. And this particular rock is a tiger's eye. And most of us know tiger's eye because of how it looks when it's polished. But what I think is really cool about this particular rock is it's unpolished. It's a raw tiger's eye. That's what tiger's eye looks like when it's not polished. And I just think tiger's eye is like one of the coolest minerals. How it refracts and captures the light. So I'm going to read from this little book, The Pocket Book of Stones. What does tiger's eye mean? And we're going to learn about that today. My intuitive sense, my feeling of it and my somewhat knowing, meaning I'm just going to share and then we'll see how accurate I am or how inaccurate I am. But my sense is that it conducts a lot of earth energy and that it has a lot of masculine energy to it. Let's find out. What do people say? People that know this stuff better than me. Tiger eye. Oh, it's just a singular. Tiger eye. One tiger eye. Keywords: balance between extremes, discernment, vitality, strength, practicality, fairness. It aligns with the third and second and first chakra. So that's your solar plexus, your sexual / creative chakra, and your root. The elements of fire and earth. Oh, nailed that one. Supports hormonal balance, thank goodness. Enhances general vitality. Spiritual, instills spiritual balance, stamina, creativity, and clarity. I'm going to read a little bit more, but I'm hearing a lot of the masculine energy in that. Tiger Eye is a solar stone of vitality, practicality, and physical action. Very masculine, energetic traits. Stimulates the root chakra and solar plexus, assisting one in taking effective actions and remaining grounded, calm, and centered. It's a stone of mental clarity. It activates and whets the intellect, sharpening the sword of logic. It also opens the mind to embracing paradox. Tiger Eye energizes the body to accomplish the imperatives of the will. Cool. Well, that's definitely some alpha energy. So that concludes Rock Talk here with your host, Adam Quiney, the only host with the sheer balls to talk about rocks on a live show when no one's watching. Who does that stuff? This guy does. That's delightful. I'm having a great time. Okay, well, I should probably start to talk. Well, I don't want to go into topics just yet. I want to see what else can I share about, well, how has this week been? What's been up for me? What is there to share? What distinctions have I taken from this week? One of the things, this will be like a pickleball sort of story that'll speak to something I notice exists ontologically. And one of the things that happens in a game of pickleball is you get to this point where both teams are right at the net and you're doing what's called a dink. And a dink is a short, very short shot, the intention of which is to hit a shot that the other team can't attack. So in some, like, I guess maybe really young, almost like immature players, this would be a boring shot. It's like, come on, I want to blast the ball. The point of the dink is you take that option away from your opponent, and then they're forced to return a soft shot. And so pickleball becomes a bit of this mental game. There's sort of like a mental chess that's happening, which is like, I want to return the ball onto your side in such a way you can't attack at me, and I kind of want to throw you off your game. And the reasons I want to do that is because if I throw you off your game, or if I outlast your patience, then you're going to try to attack too soon or hit too hard, and then I can kill you. I can attack you. And so I was playing last night and I was sitting in these battles and I was noticing in myself and other people the urge to move things forward. Like, we're playing this dink battle. I know that there's a hilarious pun there. Don't worry, I've made a lot of those puns. I'm just not doing it on this show. We get into this dink battle, and I can feel in me this growing urge as time goes on to make something happen. I can't sit back in my trusting that something is going to happen. I have to attack. And then as soon as I do that, what ends up happening is I set the opponents up because I attack too soon. And what that means is I've tried to hit the ball hard, but because of the fact that they hit a good shot, I hit the ball in an upward trajectory, which is a big juicy shot for them to just smash off of my forehead. So I was thinking about that, noticing that in myself, and just I've been seeing that a lot lately where as humans, we have a great difficulty in sitting in patience and in trust. Trusting that if I just sit and wait a little bit, the answer will come forward. You see this in leadership and coaching all the time, where one of the things that we have to work really hard to train in coaches is the ability to sit in silence. And if you want to practice this and notice your difficulty with it, here's how you can do that. When you're next speaking, giving a workshop, or up in front of people, ask the group a question and then wait, and then don't say anything. And often what happens is there needs to be this elapsed amount of silence before people start to put their hands up, unless you've asked like a really juicy question that's just in the room. And if so, ask the next question and practice. And what you'll notice, I assert, is how hard it is to sit quietly. Like you might feel the urge to sort of like, anyone, or make a comment like, wow, everyone's really quiet, or to start singing the theme song to Jeopardy, or doing something like that, anything to break that horrible tension of that silence. Because as humans, we have a real difficulty just sitting in that, letting ourselves be with things not moving forward in the moment. And instead, we try to force them. So that's what I've been learning from pickleball ontologically this week. If you're not playing pickleball yet, you should. Who gave me a thumbs up? Ken Blackman gave me a thumbs up. What's up, Ken Blackman? Thank you for that thumbs up. That felt great. Affirmation, approval. Hey, America, it's nice to see you. One of the things I love about you, America, is you always say hi. And that might sound trite, but what I mean by it is that there's always a part of who you be in the space is always connection. Even if other people, or it might just be easy like, fuck it, I'm just here live. Adam's doing a thing anyhow. I'll just check it out for a bit. You're always reliable to say hi, to let yourself be known and to let others know that you see them. That's a beautiful gift. All right. Well, we got some topics right over here, and I'm going to talk about those topics. That's what this portion of the live is now going to, we are moving into the portion of the live where I talk about the topics. In my mind, now that I've said that, 50 people are going to clamber into this live and like it's going to get really crowded. It's going to be sweet. So topics today, finger pointing. We talk about suppressing your being at work and how to create art with that, learning how to shift that so you're no longer doing that. Talk about navigating the breakdown that precedes the breakthrough. We're going to talk about transmuting your energy and learning how to create art. And we'll talk about transcending the pendulum, or as I am trying to coin the term, the Transcendulum. That just sounds cool. It'd be a good name for a rave or something like that. Transcendulum, 1997. In the mountains of Vancouver. Now with hard house DJs. Any other people that used to rave? I used to rave a lot, and I hated hard house because it was not a melodic form of music. It was just fast, very driving kind of beat. And I, while I did plenty of recreational drugs, I never, at least intentionally, touched crystal meth. And the people that did meth, which is a very fast-paced, speedy drug, loved hard house. I don't know why I shared that. That was just there for me to share in this moment. We should get to these topics. That would probably be a better question, better conversation topic. Okay. So let's start. I think I want to start with finger pointing. And specifically, the place I want to bring this conversation is I was talking to someone who had commented on one of my posts, and the gist of the post was something along the lines of how we ultimately have to come to a place of acceptance before we can move people forward. Oh, that's right. My post was how it's easy to get caught on everything that's not working in the world. These people are doing this bad. That person's doing that bad. That corporation's doing that bad. That individual's doing that bad. I got to fix it all. My post was about how, at least for me, what brings me solace is to turn my attention back here to see how might I be contributing to the bad that I judge over there. And someone shared, I think that that's great for individuals, but for corporations and stuff, that won't work. And so I just want to talk about this notion of finger pointing and our tendency as a human to like sort of leap into this or to justify why we're doing it or to get stuck in that energy and kind of distinguish a little bit how that impact goes and why that might not work the way you're hoping it might work. So what tends to happen is we notice bad behavior, our judgment, but we'll call it bad behavior, harmful behavior with an impact that we ourselves are not okay with. And sometimes collectively we agree that that impact is not okay. For example, climate change. By and large, collectively we agree that like practices that just pollute the oceans or just fire aerosols into the environment, that sort of stuff, we collectively agree that's bad. So there's a collective agreement, but at the end of the day, ultimately there's like this internal assessment, judgment, opinion about what's happening, and that is bad. We can also see this in the way we raise our children or the way we are with ourselves, where we use a lot of like what you're doing is wrong, so stop doing that. That often is the energy we bring to ourselves first and foremost before anyone else. So an easy place for you to see this in yourself might be around dieting. It might be around your relationship to your vices like drinking, smoking, porn, TV watching. I don't know, whatever your vice is, doesn't really matter. But it can be helpful to take a look and notice how you are being towards yourself about the way you use your vices or do that sort of stuff. So often people are like, I should eat less. I should drink less. Why don't I just do that? We get very impatient, very annoyed with ourselves, very frustrated. And the energy of that is kind of like, hey, fucko, why aren't you doing the thing you know is meant to be better for you? You know what to do. You know you should eat less hamburgers. You know you should drink less wine at the end of the night. You know you shouldn't smoke pot at 8 in the whatever it happens to be. You know it. And so the energy you bring is this sort of like dogpiling on yourself, like, hey, stupid, why aren't you doing it? So that's the energy by and large that we use. That's all of us, hopefully, can find places where that's actually what we bring to ourselves and the world around us, but to ourselves first and foremost. Why aren't I fucking doing this? And we do that over and over and over again because we don't trust ultimately, we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust that if we lay off of ourselves and give ourselves some spaciousness and just let ourselves be and breathe and do that habit, we're afraid that we'll just sink all the way into it. So like back when I smoked pot, I had this like thing where I was like, I wanted to do it, but don't do it. But I want to do it, but don't do it. And I couldn't let myself kind of go all the way into it. We're constantly holding ourselves at a degree of like arm's length or at bay. We're caging a part of ourselves. And so as a result, we're very reluctant to let go of that energy. I need to like police myself. That's what we end up doing. And underneath that is like this fundamentally a lack of trust in ourselves. If I stop policing myself, if I stop hitting myself with the baton every time I do this, then I'll just always do it and then I'll never come through on the other side. So that's kind of like our fear that drives a lot of this stuff. And consequently, because of that being the way we relate to ourselves, it's also the way we relate to other people. This can be a valuable little piece of leadership for you, personal leadership. If you find yourself really annoyed with someone based on how they show up around other people, and you're like, man, it's hard for me to find compassion for that person, one really valuable way, an easy way to access compassion is to consider that that shitty energy they're putting out there onto other people, that's the same thing they're doing internally. Their life inside of their world is miserable, if that's what you're noticing. Consequently, if you notice someone is really like generous with other people, cool, they're probably being very generous with themselves. So we act this way internally and we put that way on other people. We don't trust that we will come through on the other side. And so then we don't trust other people will come through on the other side. And so we have this sort of policing kind of like attacky kind of negative, like, hey, stop doing that stupid energy that we put into the world. And what I notice in my work with people, first internally, I'm going to talk about, then I'm going to shift to externally. But internally, what happens is usually people come to me and they're actively doing that policing of themselves. They're being quite brutal, especially when it's high performers I'm working with. They're especially brutal. And you can get pretty far in your life being brutal, smacking yourself in the back of the head with a 2x4. You can create some results from that place. It's just like, okay, you created all these results, but the cost of getting them is that you're constantly and with increasing frequency smashing the back of your head with a 2x4. Is that the game you want to be playing? So when those people come to me, they're kind of at a point where they've like been doing this forever and they're like, it's not working as well as it once did. No shit. You've developed a callus, big giant callus on the back of your head. It's like a foot back there, the bottom of your foot. So it's not working as well as once did. And they're really what they're looking for from me, what they think they need from me, and what they're expecting from me is that I'm now going to hit them in the head harder than they've been hitting themselves. Oh, I'll work with Adam, and then he'll really fuck me up. He'll smash the back of my head harder than anyone. He's a hard ass. He says stuff like fuck. He swears. I swear at me internally. He's probably the one for me. And it's what I notice as I witness people doing this is that in that aggressive internal behavior, they can't find themselves. They can't slow down and situate themselves within themselves. They can't stop and bring love and grace. They can't find any room for their humanity because they're so busy making themselves wrong for it. And so it's very hard for them to move anywhere off of this point because they're just constantly beset and besieged with this energy that they're bringing into the world. And so what I notice makes the biggest difference for these people. Well, let me offer a metaphor first that involves you punching yourself in the face. So it's a good metaphor. Imagine that the way you've learned to motivate yourself in your life is by hauling off and punching yourself in the face every time you're not doing something you think you should do. And you come to me. Hold on, you haven't come to me yet. You've gotten better and better and better at this to the point where this behavior is now automatic. It's not even conscious anymore. That's efficiency. When something stops being conscious, we become very efficient at it. That's why we can drive fairly effectively. It's because it's not conscious. Oftentimes you don't even remember, you're not even conscious of your drive home through traffic. You just like finished work and then you're like at home and then you're kind of like, oh, whoa, how did I get here? So you initially started punching yourself in the head to try to motivate yourself to do stuff and it worked. And then over time, it's no longer conscious. You've forgotten that you even started doing that. You haul off and belt yourself in the face. And then you start getting to work because it feels uncomfortable and you don't want that again. And so you come to me and you say, Adam, I've got these terrible headaches. It's really rough. And they come on, there's no warning. And then they kind of go away. And I'm like, oh, sweet. And sometimes they go away for like an extended period of time. And I'm like, I think I got it. And then they start to hurt. Then they show up again. No warning at all. And as we're talking, you're like, oh my God, I think one's coming on now. And then I, witnessing you, see you haul off, belt yourself in the head. And then you're like, the headache. Adam, it just happened. Can you see? And I'm over here outside of your world with what you can consciously and unconsciously see and unconsciously not see. And I'm like, yeah, I did see that. It seems like what you did was you hauled off and punched yourself in the face. And at first, you're going to be like, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I'd know if I did that. I'm not about punching people in the face. Why would I do that to myself? We just have resistance to seeing these sort of blind spots. So that's what happens at first. And then you haul off and do it again. And I'm like, look, see, you just did it. Are you sure? Yeah. And then the next time you line up and I manage to get over there and I grab your fist, I'm like, look where your fist is. And you're like, whoa. So that's the point where you can start to consciously see what has previously been rendered unconscious. You become conscious once again of it. Oh man, Here's the trap of it, is that upon seeing yourself, punching yourself in the head, you are like, I don't want to do that anymore. And so you reach to the best tool you've discovered to motivate yourself to stop doing behavior, which is punch yourself in the head. And so the hilarity of this is that I help you see this, and then you start doing it again. Oh my God, I'm about to punch myself in the head. Stop that. That's ridiculous. I understand that. That story sounds absolutely ludicrous, and it's what every single one of us is actively doing. So we have that energy towards ourselves. Fuck, stop doing this, because we don't trust that we will take the action if we don't punch ourselves in the head. And to some extent, we have a lot of evidence to support that because it's been years that we've been using this as the tool to motivate ourselves. This finger pointy, this blaming, this, hey, knock it off, bozo, that energy to motivate ourselves. So we don't have much evidence built up to support anything else. And we're out of practice with anything else. So it requires an act of trust to start to set this down. We bring that exact same energy that we do with ourselves out there into the world. So we don't trust that if I love my child and slow him down and get him present to what he's doing and ask what he really wants to, and so on and so forth. I don't trust that that's going to work. I need to reprimand them. I need to lay into them. Now, there's a difference between loving yourself and setting a boundary and loving yourself and letting yourself off the hook completely. I want to recognize that that's there. But we don't trust any of it. And so we go to the only thing we know to do. We're kind of very all or nothing. We're like, either I punch myself in the head or I let myself get away with murder. And it's better that I punch myself in the head rather than I just start murdering people. Yes, it is, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. There's a whole spectrum of opportunity in between punching yourself in the head and the murdering people. So we have to learn this. We have to practice with this. We have to get supported to notice this tendency and then to set it down. And then we have to kind of sit in the hard part, the liminal stage, where you are no longer using the motivation of punching yourself in the head to move forward, but you haven't yet discovered any alternative way. And that's the part that's really scary for people. That's the part where it looks like we're not going to pull through. Now it's like, yeah, I'm not punching myself in the head, but I'm not doing anything. At least before I was doing something at him. This sucks. And because we can't be with that in ourselves, we can't be with that in other people or other corporations. And so consequently, what we have is a world stuck in that energy, the energy of finger pointing, of blame, of whatever. We are stuck in this world where when we see behavior that we deem bad, we go to calling it out from blame and judgment rather than finding our way to love, finding our way to acceptance, and then meeting someone in that. I want to be clear, none of this is about stopping. It's not about not calling attention to something that is harmful and its impact. It's about the internal stance we have prior to stepping forward and addressing the impact. So what most of us do is all of this is opaque to us. We're not present to any of it. We have our blame, our judgment, our stick hitting techniques. We know that's the thing to do. And we're like, it's time to call you out, motherfucker. Brackets, because that's what I would do to me internally. And then we call that person out. And from that blame and judgment, we entrench ourselves further in our own position. And we defend ourselves. And we make the person calling us wrong for the way they're showing up. And then we just perpetuate the same sort of thing. So it's not going to work. Finger pointing doesn't work. Blaming doesn't work. But we keep trying it. The practice here is to try this with yourself. To practice noticing the version of you hauling off and punching yourself in the face. And then doing the hard work of seeing if you can catch that and then setting it down. And then sitting in the trust that is required as you slowly learn a new way to motivate yourself to create change. This is a little bit tricky because sometimes the world is applying that pressure too. So we're kind of like doing this to ourselves and the world is also hitting us with its own stick. And every time you bring that energy of pointing, of putting blame towards someone, that's what you're doing. You're doubling down. So sort of like through your own closure, you become this closed fist, and then through someone else blaming you, judging you, reprimanding you, whatever, they put their fist over you too. And now it's really hard to unfold because you kind of first got to get out from under that tyranny and then out from under your own tyranny. I don't know, America, I see that there's 4 people here. Can someone else, first of all, say hi? Okay, Christina. Hey, Christina, it's nice to see you. So Christina's saying that my audio is good. So America, it might be yours. Maybe your headphones or maybe someone's running a microwave near you. That can mess up Bluetooth, I've noticed. Don't microwave a burrito when you're on a Bluetooth call. It'll play havoc. So that's what happens when we finger point. Here's the stand I have for the world. You don't have to join me in this, but it's an invitation. It's a stand to take, which is for, hey, Tommy, nice to see you. The invitation is for us to move beyond this finger pointing, this blaming, because it doesn't work. And if you believe it works, if you really think like, hey, from this change happens, great, keep doing it. So I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. That's your choice. But the opportunity is for us to bring gentleness and loving acceptance, starting with ourselves, and begin with that. And notice if that makes a difference for you. If you are berating yourself for how you eat, you might practice really empowering the choices you make and trusting there's some reason I'm doing this. And until you can lovingly accept the actions you're taking and really trust that they're for a reason, until you can accept that, it's going to be hard for you to get to that reason because you're so caught up on hating yourself for the thing you're doing that all of your attention activity lies at this layer. You can never get down to the thing below. What does my eating keep me safe from? What does it protect me from? How does it help me? We can't get down to that because we're engaged in self-hate. So the stand I am for the world is that we can move to a place of loving acceptance and really hang out there. And from that place, transformation can actually happen. I am doing this because I found that's what works with the people I work with. That's what works with me. Is every time I get caught in like, fuck, I'm not doing the thing I meant to do. I need to, that is the energy that keeps me stuck. And every time I slow down in the face of my resistance to doing so and like breathe and like, what if I just let myself be here and did this, even though I got judgments about it? That's where the magic starts to take place. It's almost miraculous because we don't have any context in which that is how things would work. That's basically what a miracle is. Like to a tribe that have never been touched by modern society, an airplane is a miracle. To people who don't have any context for motivating themselves other than berating themselves, the idea that just loving and accepting themselves could work and help them motivate themselves even more is a miracle. So that's the miracle I stand for. And I stand for it by practicing it here first, supporting the people I work with to do it, and doing this live. Christina, also doing a live on acceptance. Good. I'm glad to hear it. So now we've got 2 people on this journey. We've already doubled our numbers just by me doing this. You were the trailblazer, and then doubled the numbers. This is exponential growth, people. This is going to blow up. We're going viral. Okay, well, we got some good topics provided by Tibby and Simon. Thank you, Tibby, as always, for your awesome topics. And then I want to talk about transmuting energy because I think that's a really big one too. And Christina's saying, when we are willing to be messy in life and still take action, it's everything. Standing for love and acceptance in ourselves can change the world. Yes. And I believe it's the way to change the world is from love and acceptance. And I'll talk more about this, but love and acceptance doesn't mean you just let people do anything they want all the time constantly. That is something different from the transcendent stand for love and acceptance I'm talking about as leader, and the one I am guessing Christina is also talking about. Cool. So Tibby writes, I recently listened to your episode on work-life balance. Smart person here listening to the podcast. And I'd love for you to elaborate on cases where a certain aspect or way of being is suppressed at work. But if we try to bring more of it, for example, more wit, our leadership, team, boss, whatever, doesn't allow that aspect to be fully expressed. Can you elaborate on that? Yes, I can. First, it's very important I put a link to my podcast here now that I've mentioned it. Pow. Ha. Oh, what? It was meant to expand that. Let's try that one more time. Ba-do-do. Oh, it doesn't want to do my text expansion. Okay, well, I'll just delete that. Everything is working just fine. Yes, I'm certain I want to delete this comment. Thank you very much. There we go. I think that worked that time. Yes, it did. So what Tibby is describing looks like this. This is the way it goes. Is that let's imagine we have someone with wit. That's the one he brought. So someone with wit, naturally playful, they're naturally agile, they know how to kind of shift perspective. People that bring the quality of wit are quite good at being aware of like a perspective, and then they can shift it. And as we shift perspective, everything looks kind of different all of a sudden. And so wit has a number of like kind of ways it can impact us. If anyone remembers those 90s magic eye posters that were all the rage, they were like these boring looking, I think they called them stereographic images. They were just like, they looked like just random colors. They're quite ugly to look at. And then if you looked at it and let your eyes kind of go out of focus, suddenly it would pop into a 3D image. It was really cool. That's the nature of wit. It can be astonishing. It catches us off guard, and it often creates laughter in us, which is the experience of kind of like being like caught off guard a little bit. So wit is often funny. And it can be playful and it can lighten the moment, and sometimes it can be inappropriate and blah, blah, blah. Imagine we have someone who were kind of taught growing up that, look, your funniness is great, but it's not appropriate when you're at a professional setting. And so what this person does is they learn in situations, circumstances, and around people that seem professional or like that original training, they learn to quell their wit. They suppress it, they damp it down. So they're a joyful person, but at work, they're very somber. They're very serious. Maybe some of you can relate to being this way. A lot of my people are. This is what I learned to do. I was this hilarious, fun, dorky guy, but when I was at law, the job of law, I was very serious and there was not that much wit or playfulness, and we were there to get work done. And we would get work done and it would be heavy and somber. Then we would finish that and then we'd go have fun. So Tibby's question is, what do we do when we're in that situation and we want to start to practice more with this, but then our leadership is like, don't do that. So I'm going to lay out a little bit what actually got created for this person at their job, and then why that can be tricky, and then how to practice with it. That's my 3-part attempt. Those are the bullet points I'm going to hit. So the first thing is that we learn what parts of ourselves to overexpress and underexpress at a really young age. And then we get better and better and better at practicing that. The overexpression or the underexpression are both a distortion of what's innate for us. So if you're someone who is love, but you grew up around an uncle that was really kind of like cold and you hated the way that made you feel, you might have learned to be extra loving and always bake cupcakes for people and make sure that they never, ever in a million years would feel that way you felt around that uncle. So that's an overexpression. You're going above and beyond what is innate and natural because you don't trust that it's okay. You don't trust that you're enough love as it is. As soon as someone starts to feel a little bit cold or left out, it questions your whole identity. That's the overexpression. The underexpression would be like we just described for wit. So we learn this super young, and then we just naturally, inevitably practice it unconsciously. We just keep finding more situations like that original training, and we keep practicing, and we keep noticing it's working. So this person who has learned to suppress their wit is naturally and unerringly and without any conscious thought going to find themselves into a profession that rewards that tendency. I found myself into a profession where wit isn't always particularly appreciated, where being somber and keeping yourself buttoned up is rewarded. And I could blame it like, oh, the reason I'm this way is because of my profession. But I found that profession because it was a perfect fit for how I'd already learned to be and honed over years of practice prior to coming into this profession. So we kind of like, we're like a key out there in the world and we find a lock to fit into. It's a perfect fit. So what that means is when some crazy person starts to learn about this kind of leadership, transformational leadership, ontological leadership, and wants to practice, they have put themselves in a place that's going to have a reaction to that. Because it's sort of like if the key that I am is a perfect fit for this lock, and now I start to try to change the way I show up, there's going to be bumpy, right? That key is going to start to bump against the edges of that lock. It's not going to be as smooth as it once was. So first, no matter what you do, if you start to practice expressing a little more of who you are truly, of what's innate when you've been suppressing it all these years, it's going to have friction. There's going to be people that have a reaction to it. So that's inevitable. That reaction is not bad. It's not even significant. It just means you're practicing something new. And that's a necessary component. It's a gate through which you must walk if you wish to become more fully expressed. One of the things I was practicing with was being more vulnerable. And part of the way that looked when I was practicing law was like I went to my principal and shared like, hey, I feel a little awkward because you keep telling me to listen very carefully, but I think I am. And so I'm just not sure what's going on and I feel kind of stupid. And, it's okay, but I just want to like, am I being stupid here? Is that what's going on? And that was like a confronting moment for both of us because I'm practicing something that doesn't happen in law. That's not don't do that. In law, the kind of predominant context, we could say, the way of being is like, Did you do the research? Go back and do the research. If you have a question, I'm very busy, so make sure you've done your research before you come and ask me the question. And here I am like, hey, I'm feeling kind of dumb. I'm breaking all those rules because I wanted to practice something different. And and that was confronting for my principal because my sharing of this way also had him take a look at how he was being. I wasn't intending that. That was just the impact of it, right? So anytime we practice, it's going to be confronting. And to some extent, we just have to be willing to be with that confrontation. That's the nature of the game. If you don't want any confrontation, if you don't want any friction, if you want to never have to experience that, just keep doing what you're doing. That's why we stay in these forced patterns that we all are in. It's because we're like, I don't want that confrontation. It feels bad. Yeah, it does. That's what is required to transform. Got to be willing to go through that. There is, however, a second part to this. And the second part is that if you have spent years, decades, a lifetime learning to suppress a part of you, you will likely not be particularly elegant or graceful at calibrating how you express this thing as you start to practice. You will probably be pretty, how do you say it, fucking obnoxious about it. You're going to be like, it's time to be funny about everything. And you'll be making jokes at the business meeting about farting, and people will be like, yo, we're actually trying to get something done here. And so that is your work. And the challenge is that we have to kind of distinguish the first thing I said, which is that your environment's always going to be a bit hostile at first to your practice of expression. And you're going to be kind of clumsy and not really be very responsible or artful in your expression, in your practicing of that expression. So you're right, or it's true that your world has to kind of, it's just going to be confronted. And then your world is also right that you're kind of being obnoxious, and it's a bit of both. And so what typically happens here is the environment around us reacts, is like, yo, not super appropriate. And then we, because we're feeling kind of vulnerable, we're practicing something new. We're like, yo, I'm practicing leadership, motherfuckers, and we make them wrong for the reaction. And that lets us off the hook of taking a look to see, like, how did maybe I do that in such a way that drove up more confrontation from them than might really, how can I receive this feedback they're giving me? And what most people do is they don't go down that path. They just go, fuck you. I'm trying to be a leader over here. And by the way, I'm not speaking from any position of like privilege or I got this figured out or I know it. I'm much better at this these days, but in the early days, as I was practicing being more vulnerable and intimate and all that, I was a super mess and caused all kinds of like discomfort with my friends and made them all kinds of wrong for their reaction and their feedback to me about how I was showing up. So this is human. This is what it looks like. And so we have to recognize there's going to be some confrontation and not make that significant or wrong. And we have to also recognize we're probably not going to do this as artfully as we could as we're starting to practice with Bambi legs. And we have to practice noticing our closure and us making themselves wrong, and instead practice like, hey, the only place the work can be done is right here with me. And open ourselves back up and listen to the feedback. Be like, okay, God, there's some gold in this feedback for me. I might hear, because I'm so sensitive right now, that they don't want any part of me, but maybe there's a different way I can hear this. Maybe what they're just saying is like, hey, maybe don't make jokes about farts when we're talking to a client. And so this is how we learn to go from being censored, which is the first stage, to blurting, which is the second stage of leadership practice. You have to go through this. Blah, this is my truth. Blah, I'm being authentic. Blah, I'm making jokes because I'm funny and I just realized that. Blah, blurting. The second stage, and this is how we move from the second stage to the third stage, which is responsibility and the ability to hey, Charmaine, it's nice to see you. The ability to calibrate ourselves, not because what is innate to us or how we are expressed or how we show up in the world is wrong, but because we're committed to something beyond just being fully expressed as ourselves. At this third stage, we become committed to like, what would move this moment forward? What is the greater thing I'm committed to other than just me being expressed? hey, I want to like do best by my law firm too and be expressed. How is there for me to show up that would allow all of that? And so that allows us to start to develop the ability to be like, what is the right level of wit to express in this moment? What is the right level of practice? We develop the ability to calibrate. And from there, we are no longer choosing out of maybe fully expressing the funny joke that we have on the tip of our tongue because we feel it's wrong. We're choosing out of it because we recognize that's not what is the best thing to do in this moment. That stage to move to is a bit challenging for people when they've spent their lifetime repressing themselves. Because it feels at first, if they haven't hung out in blurting enough and if they don't have artful leadership supporting them, it feels like they're going back to suppression. It's not, it's like, it looks like that. It's actually you're rising up. You're calibrating this ability to pick and choose what would most serve the moment, what would support at best my leadership in this moment, rather than I just put it all on the table all the time. That's great, but here at this office, we need you to wear clothing. So get dressed. And if you can't do that, we can't have you here. We're sorry. It doesn't work to lead naked here at the law firm. Maybe where Charmaine's going, the drag queen, maybe being naked works very well. Get pasties and stuff. I don't know. Charmaine, that's cool. First couple of drag show performances as a new queen. I love it. Are you still doing burlesque? I'm a fan of burlesque. Burlesque is dope. You still doing that work? I love everything about it. Cool. So that's the transition. And the hardest part I find is when people are practicing something new, when people are moving from censure to blurting, the hardest part is not making the world wrong for the feedback they are providing us. Instead, we want to hold it with as much grace as we can muster. We want to hold the world and its feedback with the same grace we want the world to hold us and our expression. This is challenging, right? It's sort of like when people are like, I want to be authentic, and they don't want it. But what's really happening under the covers is actually you want to be able to be authentic, but you don't want them to be authentic about how they feel about your authenticity. So we have to kind of go first in this practice. We have to be like, hey, I want them to really receive my expression with grace and with consideration. And if I want them to do that, I'm going to have to do the same with their feedback. I'm going to have to receive it with grace and with like a real commitment to see the gold in it. And as you practice this, you become more resilient, more open, but resilient at the same time to feedback, as opposed to calloused against it, which is what happens when people are like, I'm a truth teller. I don't care what people think. Go you. You become more open and resilient to it, and you become better able to work with the moment, and you become very masterful in your ability to be fully expressed, but at the same time not give up leadership and support the moment to move to wherever the moment is moving to. Great, great question, Tibby. I guess I'll finish all of this by saying like there are times and places where it's just like, okay, this isn't the place for me. Sometimes that is the case, but it's such an off ramp for our ego. It's such an off ramp for our survival mechanism to be like, yeah, the problem's this place, the problem's these people. So if you really want to practice this, I would invite you to do the internal work rather than being like, I think this is that one in a 999 places that I just need to move on from. It's much better to stay and do the work longer than you want to, because that's going to help you really practice the internal work first. And once you can do that internal work, then you can leave from a much more empowered place, much more powerful place. Okay. Char's doing all the things, right on. Way to go doing all the things. And Charmaine's saying my workplace is very supportive, and this has made me able to go from censure to blurting to a graceful inclusion. It has been a journey over a few years. This convo is super relevant to me. Right on. I love it. And Christina's saying, if you want to change the world, change the eyes in which you see. I know someone important said that, but forgot who. Perhaps Gandhi. Our perception of life is the driver of our behavior. Yes, indeed. It's everything. And I'm a firm believer in going first in all of these things. So I think that there's just such value in, I want them to receive me. I want them to receive my authenticity without changing it. Great. Go first. So they've given you an authentic reflection of how they feel about your authenticity. Receive that without needing them to change it at all. Magic happens when we practice that, but it's tough. It's not free. It's not easy. Great question, Tibby. Thank you. Let's go to what Simon asked. Simon, asking for a friend, he clarifies. Thank you, Simon, and thank your friend for me. Can you talk, Adam, about the moment in transformation when you feel like you have nowhere to go but back to your old ways in desperation to save slash fix the situation or through your fear and into the unknown? How do you navigate that moment when you're aware of the desire to regress and the trust necessary to move through it? So Simon is doing a beautiful job of describing the breakdown. The breakdown always precedes the breakthrough. If you want to build a mansion on the plot of land where you currently live, you will have to knock down the walls of the cabin that you currently have built there. And there's a point in time where living inside the cabin is no longer viable because you've kicked the walls down, but all you have is a giant hole in the ground. What's up, Eric? It's good to see you, brother. All you have is a giant hole in the ground. You don't yet have a mansion. And it's starting to rain and it's getting cold at night and it's dark. And you're like, I don't see how this big hole becomes a mansion. So I'm going to go back and put the cabin back up. The walls are still kind of on the ground. I could put them back up really quick. I figured it out. I've done right. That was a crazy idea I had. What up, PDX? Portland rules. Eric, is Portland doing better? The last time I was down for WDS, it felt a bit sick, a bit tired, a bit like there was just some strife that the city was moving through. The downtown in particular felt a little bit not as vibrant and well as I felt it in the past, which is saying something because I often feel Portland has a real vibrancy, a real strong sense of community. Hey, Carole. Bonjour. Okay, so Simon's talking about this breakdown before the breakthrough. That's where you kick down the walls of your place and then you're stepping into the condo. And as I share that metaphor for this experience, we're all like, oh yeah, totally. I can imagine how that's going to go, and I know there'll be this part, so I'll preemptively get in front of it, and I'll get a sleeping bag and maybe a bivouac or bivouac or whatever that's called. None of that is how we experience it, because the breakthrough, the step into the breakthrough is outside anything we already know. The mansion, condo, cabin example I've given you, we already know about that. We understand how that will work. And so we don't have the same experience. And so what Simon's talking about here is that feeling where we got clear that the old strategies no longer work. We're very clear these patterns, they got me here, but they're holding me here now. And I want to go there. I want to create a result outside of this. So I'm going to have to let go of these old patterns. And as we let go of those old patterns, the stuff that they were managing for us starts to like come up. You know, if you had a pattern where you constantly were smiling and chipper with people so that they liked you, and then you decided that sucks, it's not giving me what I want, and you stop doing that, you're suddenly going to get confronted with this intense feeling that people maybe don't like you that much because you're no longer doing the thing to manage that fear. So you're in this feeling where you feel like you have nowhere to go but back to your old ways. How do I move forward? I can't think of anything. That's the breakdown. And to Simon's question, how do you navigate that moment when you're aware of it? What do you do? How do you move through it? So that's a good question. This is part of the reason we have a coach, is because with a coach, what my coach does for me is when I'm in those moments, she first of all helps me distinguish that I am trying to go back to the old patterns. Like I'm trying to pick up the old tools. Because the first thing that happens is we're not always even aware of it. Like I'll get triggered because I'm trying to create this new vision, this new retreat or whatever. And I'm getting into like really, I'm like, okay, I got to do some busy action. I got to do all this stuff. And she's like, yeah, it kind of seems like that's your old, is that the thing you want to do? It seems like your old patterns. Like, seems like you left that behind. You're ready for something new, and I'll be like, crap. Okay, that's not working. What about this? And like everywhere I go or reach for is like one of the old tools. So first we got to develop awareness of that. It sounds like, Simon, you're present to that, but it's still challenging because now you're aware that all of this stuff is the old, but you haven't yet created the new. And this is the part where we kind of just have to be in the shittiness of the breakdown. You could call this moment the moment of surrender or the fuck it moment. The fuck it moment is where for the longest time we've tried like, okay, I've tried picking up those tools, that didn't work. I've tried picking up those tools, that didn't work. I tried doing this thing, and it's like everything we reached for or tried ended up being some version of the old thing, and it's frustrating. And we keep trying, and eventually we get to this point if we are staying through with our commitment towards this breakthrough result. What commonly happens is we're like, fuck this, and we go back to the old way, and we feel like, oh, this was smart, and I feel so much more relieved, and I feel like, oh, I can breathe again. This must have been the right choice. Of course, you're going to feel like you can breathe again. Of course, you're going to feel relieved. You've just pulled away from the moment of confrontation. So try not to let how you feel dictate this. The opportunity in the fuck it moment is trying all these things, staying the course, having someone continue to stand for you, and eventually getting to the point where you're like, fuck this shit. Or like, I can't do it. Fuck. And then we stop trying. We surrender. We surrender to this experience. We might surrender to like, all right, fuck you people. You're just not going to like me. I'm going to stop managing that. I spent my whole life trying to do it. I tried not doing that and then smiling at them a certain way. I tried all this. None of it worked. Fuck it. I'm not going to keep doing it. That's our surrender. And in our surrender and in hitting the fuck it moment, that's when we can actually create the breakthrough. That's when we start doing stuff like trying something ridiculous because we just can no longer care about this thing we've been trying to avoid for so long. We're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll try this. And we start to try outside of the old patterns at that point. We're like, all right, I'm just going to try this. I'm tired of like, it's not working. Nothing seems to be working. I'll just give this a go. And in being willing to do that, that's usually where we can start to see new opportunities show up. We've tried everything. Nothing's worked. We're unwilling to let go of the commitment. And we just sort of like let it all fall away. And then from there, we can invent the next thing, the new thing. And that's usually where the breakthrough gets created. To get there, we can't intellectually surrender. So the way we would intellectually surrender might be like, I'm gonna tell myself I'm okay if my clients get upset with me, but then secretly try to still manage and make sure they don't get upset with you. So that's like a point along the way. It's like you're trying to bargain or trick your way through this. I'm okay, but intellectually you are. The fuck it moment is where you're like, you know what? Fuck these people. I'm fucking sick of trying to be everything for everyone. I'm tired of trying this. I'm tired of trying that. Fuck it. You know what? I'm okay with people being upset. I can't even keep myself being worried about this. And then you're able to start reaching for solutions that are no longer managing that thing that up until this point you've been fixated on trying to make sure it never happened. So that's how a breakthrough gets created. And that's kind of where you're at, Simon. Well, or your friend is at. And that's the thing to do. That's where the practice lies. The gift that coaches offer in this place is one, providing us a lot of love, support, and orienting when we're in this process. Because when we're in the midst of the breakdown, it's hard to see the ground we've taken. It's hard to see where we are. Our internal state feels like we're fucking everything up, or it feels like we're not moving forward at all, or it feels like we're absolutely not where we should be, and absolutely like we're somewhere where we should get out of. And we get really hard on ourselves. And the beautiful thing about transformational coaching and leadership is they can help us, our coaches, my coach can help me see like, this is beautiful where you are. You are right where you even committed to bringing yourself at him. And I'll be like, yeah, but it doesn't feel that way. And she's like, of course not. So she can kind of like normalize it for me, help me understand where I am, and help me choose back into my commitment rather back into my comfort. The comfort is strong. Especially, I don't know about the rest of you, but it's hard. And the comfort for me feels a lot like what's really comfortable for me is knowing what there is to do next. When I get into my moments of breakdown, I'm like, I don't know what to do next, and I can't figure out where to go. And help me, Rachel. Like, let's work together to figure this out. And then she supports me to see like I chose into this. I created this moment with intention. I committed here, and I'm just on that journey. So that's how we don't require a coach, but that's how a coach supports us, and they really support us with the commitment to go all the way through this. Christina's talking about you've entered the land of Dunsville, and in Dunsville, the rule is do something you've never done. I'm Dunsville, and I'm going to do something I've never done. Great, great question, Simon. Thank you. Christina, I'm with you. Christina says success is a moving target. So when we get to where we've been headed, that goal has moved again. Indeed. Okay, well, let's talk about our last topic for today, I think. We'll see. We'll see how I feel after this. It's probably going to be our last topic. And that'll be transcending energy and learning how to create art. Transmuting energy. That's the thing. So this is a post I wrote because I'd had a shady experience going through airport security at Houston Airport. I was coming home from Costa Rica, and the way this experience was set up was we got in line, as you do, and we're going through the line, and then the first woman is two women. That's not really relevant. Anyhow, the first woman was angry. I don't know why. She seemed just angry that I was there and that she was there and that security was, she just seemed angry. So from that anger, she was sort of like, put your stuff in the thing, keep moving, people, get going, come on, put your bag in. And she'd respond to questions with like an angry nod or like, yeah, and impatient, like, oh, fuck, why are these people asking these stupid questions? And so what I saw most of us doing, because there wasn't very clear directions, and this lady was kind of intimidating, was like, okay, I guess we'll just do what we do in every airport. So take my laptop out, I put it separate, I leave my Kindle in my pocket, put that with my jacket there, take my shoes off, take my belt off. And then on the other side of this machine was a second angry woman, probably angry for the same reason, I don't know. And she was getting annoyed and impatient and exasperated with us for not following the rules, the clear directions. So we're kind of like, I was like, I don't understand. So the way that played out was she asked me, is this your stuff? And I was like, yeah. And then she is like, is that your Kindle? And I'm like, yeah. And then she kind of like looked at me like, and I just said, I don't understand your facial expression. What do you, I get the sense you want me to understand something, but I don't know what it means. She's like, well, you're meant to take it out. I was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So we take it out, we put it back through. All right, there we did it. So I left. America, can you elaborate? America, just pausing here, asking a question, Adam, can you speak to why for coaching for what purpose? Can you allow, I'm not totally sure I understand your question, America, but I want to speak to it. So I left this interaction with Houston Airport feeling a bunch of things. Like I felt uh, indignant. How dare you make me feel dumb? I felt dumb. I felt stupid, like I should have known. And then I felt righteous. Fuck you. You should have. It's on you. You should have made me feel this way. And as I was walking to my restaurant because I had a layover to sit down, I was constructing in my mind like the witty, pithy thing I was going to post to like tear these people a new asshole. I was actually thinking of a bunch of things. I was thinking like, okay, one thing I could do is like express with kindness what a shithead they are. So the way that would look is like sort of be like, seems like it's been a long day, kind of like the non-stated part of that sentence is because you're being a shithead. But I'm sort of almost saying it as though I'm being kind. And I was like, no, don't do that. Especially because these people can not let you onto your plane. That's not the place to do it. And then I sat down, constructing these posts. And what I realized I wanted to do was I wanted to not further this negative energy. Like, so the first one, they're sending that negative energy at me, and then I'm bouncing it back at them, right? Through sort of kindness, but actually not. I'm just being slicker about it, but I'm still being a jerk. And then the second one is like I'm taking that energy and I'm boomeranging it out into the world through Facebook, through a post. And maybe it diminishes the energy a little bit, or maybe it sort of dilutes it a bit because it's not directed at an individual, me. It is pushed out into the world, but that energy is still flinging around in the world. It's not actually shifting in any way. The crux of that energy is negative. It's anger, and it's still bouncing around. And I was like, that's not what I want. I want to play a different game than that. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with any choice you make, by the way. It's fine to be to have that person do that and be like, you're a dickweed, and then walk away. That would be fine. That's a choice. That's not the choice I wanted to make. And so what I started to think about is like, what is it I want to do? I want to transmute this energy. I want to take this energy and shift it so that it's a different energy. And so I've been thinking about this and this art of being a transmuter and what that's like. And I want to talk and share about like the stages I've noticed kind of exist for doing this kind of work. So great, America, thank you. You're speaking generally, right? In your question, just broadly, why would someone seek out or receive coaching? Can you just confirm that for me? And then I'll come to that before we wind down. So I want to transmute that energy. The first stage of like transmuting this kind of energy is where people just hold it at bay, refuse to let it in. I am not going to be impacted whatsoever by this person's negativity. And so what happens is it's like they become a wall for the energy. And it stops with them, but the only way that energy can stop with them is by them completely shutting themselves down. They become impervious to the energy of the world. And because our heart is not a system of valves you can turn on and off, because our permeability is not something you can pick and choose, they become that wall for the negative energy, but also for the joyful energy. They don't have any ability to actually do any transmuting. They just become like a blah. They stop right there. That's kind of like the first stage. The other side of this stage is when people they're just like an open, there's no restriction whatsoever. So that negativity comes to them and then they just spray it everywhere. We've all done this. This is like when you're in traffic and you get cut off and you're mad and you're like road rage, and then you go into work and you spend the next hour over your morning coffee complaining about assholes with road rage. And it's just like you're basically just a piece of tubing. The negative energy comes and it just flows right through you. You're a conduit for it. So there's no capacity here to transmute at all. There's no agency. It just flows right through you. Both of these perfectly fine places to operate. So on the one hand, we have people that are kind of like just we could say maybe a dumb conduit for that energy. On the other hand, we have people that are just a brick wall and the energy stops there, but so too does all the joy, all the good. So that's kind of like the first level. The next level is where we want to shift the energy, but we're not willing to let it impact us. And in order to do alchemy, we have to hold something in our hand. To work with something, we have to be able to hold it. We have to let it impact us. And so what happens down this path is you get people practicing stuff like being positive because that person was negative. It's a reactive version of this. I'm going to be positive because there's too much negativity in the world. I'm going to be positive because I don't want to give people that shitty experience over there. I'm going to be positive to counteract that jerk that put me through the checkout. So it becomes there's a fuck you in it. I'm positive not for the joy of expressing positivity in the world. I'm positive because you suck. And then I get to have like this high horse and blah, blah, blah. And so what this actually does is no transmuting. First, because there's that fuck you in your energy. Whether or not you think you're expressing it in your words, you are expressing it in your energy. And second, because you're not actually changing it at all. You're just passing it along. You're doing it a little more sophisticated. It's a little harder for people to spot, to distinguish this. So the second stage is kind of problematic because it's actually almost a little bit worse. And as we start to move from this stage into a more masterful stage, what we have to start to do is let ourselves feel that negative energy. We have to let that energy get on us. That's not fun. That's that part where I was like, okay, do I tell them they're a fuckface? Do I tell them it seems like it's been a hard day? Do I complain about them on Facebook? Do I tweet a huge complaint at Houston Airport? What happens here as we start to let ourselves feel that energy is we want to get it off of us. That's very human. When we get a dose of energy that we have a hard time being with, and just to be clear, this can happen with negative energy just like it can happen with positive energy. Like if you don't have a lot of capacity to be with joy, someone's overexpression or just like a whole bunch of joy coming to you, you might end up off gassing that by complaining about people who are vapid to someone else. That's another way to do this. So we take that energy in at this stage, but then we don't have much capacity to be with it. We want to get it away from ourselves. And we get it away from ourselves by jumping to positivity, by reacting to this, by complaining at other people, by doing all of this sort of stuff, by blah, 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 all of these kind of ways. And so at this stage, as we're practicing with this, we really have to like, the practice becomes to like let ourselves be fully impacted by this and not take action, to just sit in it. And that doesn't always feel so good. That can feel quite, Christina, I see you've written something. I'm going to finish what I'm laying out here, and then I'll come back to see where I sit with what you've written. To sit with the energy means, it means a willingness on our part to be in our own negativity. When that energy comes into us, we kind of, it almost like sits in the shape of our vessel. Sort of like if I pour tea into this cup versus a different mug, the shape of the volume of tea looks kind of like the mug, as opposed to if I had a mug that was just a perfect cylinder, the shape of the volume of tea would look like that. So that energy comes into us, and then it takes the shape of whatever negativity looks like. What does righteous fury look like for me? It looks like me complaining about stuff on Facebook, blah, blah, blah. So we actually have to sit with that and be willing to not throw that energy off, either by expressing it, by complaining at it or with someone, by replacing it with joy, by doing all of that stuff. And only once we've sat with it can we then start to take it and shift it towards something else, to transmute it into something that we want to put into the world. Because once we can be with it, we no longer need to react to it. And that's the work of the alchemist, is to like receive, to stay open so that we can receive the energy that the world is providing us, however it looks, and to let it sit in us for a while so it can like come down out of a level of reactivity. And then we can figure out, what do I want to do with this to transmute this? What from here can I learn for myself? What can I put into the world that might be positive from this? Not because this was negative, but just because this energy showed up and I want to transmute it. So I notice when people practice leadership, they move along this level of mastery. They start in that. Often high performing leaders have gotten there because they're very good at not letting the world impact them at all. Everything kind of bounces off of them. The contrast or the consequence of that is they're not very impactable. And if you spend enough time around people that aren't impactable, it starts to get kind of boring. We start to be like, why am I even here? I can't make a difference for this person. I mean, they're funny, but I like my friend over there more. He's kind of funny, and I get to feel like I'm making a difference for him. Like it matters that I'm in his life. This person, it doesn't, it feels like they could take me or leave me. I think I'll just leave. So that's the first stage, that unimpactable. And as leaders learn to open their heart and be with more, then they can start to receive this, and then they can start to transmute it. And what I think that does is allows us to be a place where people feel they can bring whatever energy they have without having it judged or anything. And that allows them to kind of like release the energy, and then we can move it back into the world in a way that's artful. And that's how we shift from a negative, low frequency, whatever you want to call it, kind of energy into a positive, high frequency, loving, more loving kind of energy. Let's see what you've said here, Christina. Christina says, I don't see the energy transmutation as that linear. I find it to be a practice where you step in and out of the stages you're referring to until eventually there's a stabilized way of being based on core foundational beliefs. It's like grief. There isn't a linear process, but stages and elements. Everyone tends to go, sometimes revisiting stages. None of this is linear. I'm laying it out as distinct stages because it serves the conversation to do so. Sort of like there actually isn't a point where you are an adolescent and then you're an adult, but it serves us to distinguish that way because then we can kind of talk about it that way. So none of this is a place like, oh, I'm second stage alchemist. Now I'm third stage. In fact, to your point, Christina, exactly as you put it, we're constantly moving in and out of this with varying types of energies. Like I can receive some types of energy and do like this third stage kind of practice. And then there's other energy where you come at me and I'm just going to be like, well, fuck you too. That's what you're going to get. And not going to do that, right? It's not going to work. And that's okay. That's really that's our humanity. And as soon as we believe, it's sort of like the myth of being woke. As soon as I'm like, oh, I'm third stage, I wouldn't ever these days get caught in the first stage of not letting anything impact me. That's where my ego hides out. That's where the cognitive blind spot is formed because I've now created a story about myself that this is how I am. So I'm with you, 100% with you. Eric's just given us an update on PDX. Portland, still much the same. A lot of homeless and disruptions, which create less desire for people to go downtown. People are empathetic, but when you have people that are high or mentally unstable, you don't feel safe. Not all homeless fall into that category, but there are enough. It feels like there's no leadership around these issues. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Portland is such a, I think it's just such a cool city, and don't want to make it sound too dramatic, but I also want to be honest about the experience I had, which was like some heartbreak when I was in Portland. That one of the things that's super cool about Portland's downtown is this beautiful square called Pioneer Square. And it's quite special because it was one of the first trips Spain and I ever took, and we were really enthralled by Portland as a city. It's got this beautiful space that you can hang out in, and then there's this big, beautiful tower made of white brick, a nice clock tower on it. And when we were there most recently, that clock tower had a whole bunch of graffiti on it and like big graffiti, not like a small tag, a big piece of graffiti, not a beautiful piece of graffiti, a big piece of graffiti. And the energy of that, the ontology of that, the being of that, I was like, wow, this really feels like a city that's a bit unwell right now, or at least the downtown was, like just kind of besieged, beset, can't it almost felt like cancerous in a way, like, oh, this city's having a hard time kind of cleaning itself out, supporting. So thanks for sharing that, Eric. Let's finish up by talking about what America asked here. America, thanks for this question. So she just says, Adam, can you speak to why work with a coach? Why would someone receive or seek out coaching? Why not just journal or speak to a best friend or a therapist? That's a big question. Let's see how succinct I can be. So, uh, where do I even begin this question? I guess it's by distinguishing counseling and coaching and the spectrum of support, and then I'll bring in friends and journaling and stuff like that. So, coaching, along with the other helping professions, exists along a spectrum. At the one end of the spectrum, we have like therapeutic work, which is very like just we'll go inward, we'll look at you, we'll address whatever's showing up for you in the moment. And then at the far other end of the spectrum, you have consulting, which would be like, here's the steps you need to take them. Did you take the steps? Here's my algorithm, recipe, kind of an expert kind of thing. And coaching exists somewhere along that spectrum, probably maybe midway or whatever. Christina, I'd love to share that story. I might do that next week, just so that, well, we'll see how we do for time here. We'll see how good I can be in this particular conversation. So we have that spectrum. And so the reason we wouldn't just go to a best friend, or let's start with journaling. Why not just journal? First of all, if journaling is giving you what you want, just journal. If you're getting the shift you want in your life from journaling, then keep doing it. There should be no should in this. Choosing into coaching because you should do it, terrible idea. Likewise with therapy, go to it because you want it, because there's something you see available from that. So that's the thing to do. So if journaling works, fuck yeah, journal more. And if it stops working, don't keep journaling. Fuck nah, stop journaling as much. Choose something else. The thing that makes journaling distinct from coaching, or one of the number of things, but the big thing I see is the same thing that makes reading coaching or leadership or whatever books, watching videos, that makes them all distinct from actually working with a coach is this. We naturally have a cognitive blind spot. Many, in fact. And a cognitive blind spot is the same, it works the same way that our optical blind spot does. The same way our optical blind spot does. And the way your optical blind spot works is it's not a place you cannot see. It's a place where you cannot see that you cannot see. Meaning, if all of us look in our field of view and try to see our optical blind spot, we won't see it. In fact, if we didn't have science to confirm this for us and people saying this is the truth, we'd say it's a bunch of bullshit. There's no black fuzzy void in my field of vision. Everything's filled in. What are you talking about? And yet we know it's true. So the mind fills in that field of vision for us so that it's a complete picture. Our cognitive blind spots work the exact same way. This is why when you reflect to your friend, when you tell your friend, like, your friend's like, oh, there's no good people for dating out there. And you're like, well, the problem is that you keep dating jerks. And they're like, that's not the problem. I don't think that's what it is. I think I just need to go to, and you're like, tearing your hair out. Your friend can't see the thing you're pointing to. They are cognitively blind to it. So the challenge of a cognitive blind spot is that there is stuff that just won't get in. It won't get into our head. We're blind to it and we're unaware that we're blind to it. So whenever we journal or whenever we read or whenever we watch a leadership video, even here, we're going to listen and receive through the lens of that blind spot. Our journaling will be done through that blind spot. That blind spot will be present as we journal and as we read what we journaled. It doesn't mean that they're not helpful. It just means that there's an extent to which we cannot get to from ourselves alone. And journal, reading, leadership videos, even though those are kind of like, you could argue there's another person involved, like there's Adam here, or there's the author of the book you're reading there, you're still consuming that entirely under your own steam. It's an entirely self-driven process. And consequently, it will be brought into your internal state entirely through your blind spot. And thus, you're not going to get the stuff that probably would make the most transformational difference for you. So it's kind of interesting because when I work with people, it's not that those blind spots don't show up. They do in spades. Like I was working with a client the other day and I was sharing like, hey, I notice, you tend to do this. You tend to do this thing. I'll make something up. Like I was saying, like, let's imagine I was saying like, you tend to put yourself down. And the response I'll almost always get when we're up against a blind spot is, I'm willing to take a look at that, but I'm pretty certain I don't do that. Like I'm really positive. I buoy people up. That's how it sounds when I'm reflecting a blind spot to someone and it's that reflection's bouncing off of their blind spot. They literally can't see this. And in fact, they're quite insistent, in part because they have an identity that they are not the sort of person that would put people down or themselves. I'm really positive. So as they watch a video, as they read a book that's sort of like, hey, here's a thing to do. Notice how you're like not positive. Notice how you're negative. What's going to happen is they're going to go, oh, that's not for me. I got that one handled. And then that piece that would probably be the most impactful doesn't get in. So that's why journaling, reading, videos, they're all great. They're fine. This is not to detract from them, but they are distinct from working with a coach. So that's that. Now we'll divide the coaching profession in two. On the one hand, we have the bulk of the coaching profession, it's a whole bunch of stuff, but it's a lot of people that are untrained and have just decided they're going to be a coach. There's people that have taken training, but it's pretty shallow, pretty light. It's not particularly potent. We have people that did something like sold the company for $1 billion and now want to help other people do the same thing. That's fine, but it's not coaching, that's consulting. And we have people that are like, they're like I used to get them in dance classes where they'd come and be like, I want to dance. I want it to be cool. And then I'd start to have them practice technique and they'd be like, I don't like this. It's restricting me. I just want to do my own thing. So you have people like that in the coaching profession too. I just don't want rules. I just do my own thing. They're not even willing to learn. So you have a whole bunch of that stuff. And in that profession, that part of the profession, you have people that relate to the training of coach as like a one and done kind of thing. I went and got my degree. Now I'm done. That's the context most of the world operates for most professions. At the other side, you have coaching that really transforms people and makes a difference. And the coaches in that part of the profession relate to their training as a forever thing, never over. And that training typically includes working with their own coach for the rest of their life because of the profound difference that makes for them. And two, continuing to seek out new teachers because they recognize this work is like a mountain with no top. You never arrive. You never finish your work. There's always going to be new edges. And you're always going to get clients that are up for the next breakthrough you're up at. So if you stall, so too will the clients you get. So that first part of the coaching profession I described, where you have people that are like, I do it and then I'm done, and then their work stops, that matches a lot of the therapeutic profession, a lot of the consulting profession, a lot of the rest of the coaching profession that's not really making much of a difference, which is you have a lot of people that are kind of like, I've done my training and now I'm done. And that's okay. But that's distinct from working with someone that is like continually engaged with their own transformation. And that's what I hold sets real transformational coaching apart from all of the other stuff that's available there. Early on, people are like, why would I work with a coach when I could go like, sorry, my hair's being a bit crazy. Why would I work with a coach? Like, this therapist has got a degree. And in the early days of coaching, that question is like, yeah, good point, you know? But then as the years go on, the therapist has like got a degree and has done work, which is good. They've got experience and they've got the degree, but that's what they've got. And maybe like some continuing education units, but let's not put too much credit into that. Coaching profession has that too. Whereas the transformational coach has got the degree and has been working with a coach of their own for 10 years and has been going and doing this and going and doing this. And it's not to say that there's not therapists like that, but the bulk of that profession, I would say, is not people committed to their own work that same way. And part of the reason that doesn't exist in therapy is because therapy has a kind of a almost a pedestal or a separation or a distinct, like the therapist operates in a different space. They don't come down and meet the client where they're at. They never bring themselves into the space. And consequently, there's a degree to which they don't have to, their own work and or lack thereof can remain opaque from the client. Whereas in transformational coaching, we got to get in there with the client. I got to be able to share in a powerful way with my client the struggles I've had or am having in intimacy in my own relationship, sometimes to support my client to really see something for themselves in their work. So this has coaching be really transformational and really distinct, I think, from a lot of the other stuff that's out there. And doesn't mean it's right or better, but if you want something transformational, I think this is the way to go. Here's the final thought I have on this. Probably. We'll see. None of this should be a rule. And if you find someone that really vibes with you, great, that's the person to be with. Here's what I notice. When I am around people that are transformational, which is to say, when I'm around people that have spent a number of years deep in their own work, working with their own teachers, working with their own coaches, working with plant medicine, working with mentors, continually and ongoingly raising the bar for themselves. So not just staying with the same person forever, but always seeking out the next teacher that can show them something new, the coach that's continually growing themselves so that the client also grows. When I spend time around those people, I have a fundamentally different experience than when I spend time around people that aren't doing that. And the difference in that experience is that it's transformative simply being with them. Just the very nature of being in a conversation with them, I start to notice stuff for myself. I see things for myself. And it's not because they're saying, hey, Adam, you should see this for yourself. It's more a virtue of how they're being. And the way they're being makes it really easy for me to start to look over here at myself. Have you ever been with someone who's like, you know what you should do? And then they tell you, but it's really hard for you to like receive that because you're like, maybe you should fucking do it. You know, it doesn't feel good for people to tell us what we should do. So when I'm around someone transformational, that's not present. It becomes very easy for me to learn something from myself around them. And the way they show up in their own life is very inspiring for me. And so that's the baseline for me. That's what I look for in any teacher, any coach that I'm choosing into, any shaman that I work with. How do I feel when I'm around this person? Does the way they're being feel powerful? Not powerful like forceful or loud, powerful like, damn, I can really get something from myself just by being around them. And from there, for me, it's a no-brainer. Once I choose in, it doesn't really matter what we're doing. Somatic work, energetic work, ontological coaching, leadership development, all of that is just like the paint on the building itself. So that's the biggest reason I think working with coaching, working with a coach that's deep in their work, that's why I say someone would take that work on, is because they really want to create transformation in their own lives. Whew, a lot to say. America, I'm just reading comments now. It's not that the coach holds magic, but rather they can just see what you can't at times. Yes, that's part of it. And they've allowed someone else to help them see what they couldn't at times. One of the things that's really seductive in this profession is to tell people, like leaders always want to do this. They want to develop other people's leadership. They don't want to have their leadership developed because that's really vulnerable. It's very safe to tell other people what they can do or like ask for them to step up, but it's not very safe to do that yourself, to have someone do that for you. And so that creates like this block. You're not really willing to receive what you're trying to give, and then that shuts it all down. And so the coach has to do that too. They have to have been willing to choose into having other people help them see the thing that they can't see and to be with the resistance that comes up when we have our blind spots reflected to us. And that part I would say America is a superpower. You know, America wrote, so it's not a superpower, it's just another pair of eyes that are trained, but I would actually say it becomes a superpower, this real compassion. One of the things that I aim to provide and that my coach always provides to me is like tremendous compassion for when we get to that place where we're like, fuck, I'm doing it wrong. Because what we try to do is take that energy and use it to drive ourselves forward. Christina writes, working with a coach puts all that work on the coach. The very nature of the relationship is for you to be on the court of your life. It's engaging and challenging because it's all about facing you, your beliefs, choosing identity, blind spots, triggers, and so on. Coaching is about a relationship intended to build acceptance, responsibility, and trust with life. Last thing I'm going to say is that I think you guys are awesome. There was something else I was going to say, but I changed my mind. So I think you guys are awesome. Thank you for spending this time with me. Really, really appreciate the questions from Tibby and Simon. And next week, I'll talk about the Transcendulum. And I'll also share to your question or what you wrote here, Christine, I'll share a personal story of how coaching was transformative for me. I have a lot, just ended up running out of time today. Have a great weekend, guys. Love you. Peace.